The night had settled into its usual eerie stillness at a hospital in Dallas, Texas. The type of quiet that made every squeak of the floor, every distant beep of a machine echo like thunder. Two nurses, veterans of the graveyard shift, were stationed on a floor that was known among staff for its strange happenings. There had always been whispers about this part of the hospital. Rumors passed between nurses during breaks, patients mentioning strange figures and unsettling sounds. While most shrugged it off as the stress of long hours and dim lights, some staff knew better. Tonight, these two nurses would experience something that would chill them to their cores. It was close to midnight, the hour when the weight of exhaustion mixes with the unnatural silence of the hospital. The nurses were cleaning up the medical station, their focus sharp as they prepared to make rounds. The overhead lights flickered slightly, a common occurrence in this old wing, but tonight it seemed to add an extra layer of unease. Then it happened. At first, it was subtle, a faint sound like a distant hum, so quiet that if you weren't paying attention, you could have missed it. But both nurses paused, their hands freezing mid-task as the sound grew clearer. It was unmistakable, the voice of a child. "Did you hear that?" one nurse asked in a low, almost disbelieving tone. "Yes," came the whispered reply, eyes wide with unease. The sound wasn't just an echo, not just a figment of imagination. It was as though a little girl were standing just out of sight, softly humming, or maybe giggling. It was the kind of sound you'd expect to hear in a playground, not in the middle of a hospital ward at midnight. Nervously, they looked around. No children were on this floor. There shouldn't have been anyone nearby, let alone a young girl. The corridor outside was dark, the room silent, yet the humming persisted. The sound, though faint, carried an unnerving innocence, a sound so out of place that it sent shivers down their spines. The nurses continued working, but their movements were tense. They tried to brush it off, to chalk it up to fatigue or stress, but the moment haunted them. When they reviewed the footage from that night, they were stunned. The audio was faint, but there it was again, a soft hum, barely audible, yet impossible to ignore. They played it back, again and again, each time growing more unsettled by what they had captured. The strange occurrences didn't stop there. Days later, another nurse, unaware of the previous incident, was working the same shift on the same floor. She stood near the nurse's station when she too heard it, the humming. This time, she quickly pulled out her phone and started recording, determined to catch whatever was happening on camera. The video shows the empty corridor, the dim lights casting long shadows, and then there it was again, a child's voice. "That was you, right?" she asked her colleague, her voice trembling as she turned towards the sound. "No," the other nurse responded, shaking her head slowly, her face pale with fear. The humming, as soft and innocent as it seemed, filled the room with a sense of dread. The two nurses stood frozen, their eyes darting around the empty hallway, searching for the source of the sound. But no one was there. No child, no patients. Only the persistent, eerie hum. It wasn't long before the stories began circulating. Nurses who had worked this shift for years had heard the humming before. Some even believed they knew the source. They whispered about the spirit of a little girl who had once been a patient on this very floor. The details of her passing were hazy, lost to time, but her presence, it seemed, had never left. The nurses didn't talk much about it during the day. After all, who would believe them? But those who worked the night shift, especially on this particular floor, knew better. They had heard the stories, and now they had experienced it for themselves. But the humming wasn't the only strange occurrence. Over the weeks, other nurses reported hearing faint giggles, the sound of footsteps in empty hallways, even the sight of fleeting shadows just beyond the edge of their vision. Patients, too, claimed to have seen a young girl standing at the foot of their beds, only to blink and find her gone. But it was the humming that remained the most unsettling. That soft, childlike melody that echoed through the dark, empty halls, a constant reminder that something or someone was still there. The hospital staff tried to brush it off, to carry on with their work. After all, in a place where life and death were everyday occurrences, strange things were bound to happen. But for the nurses who had heard the humming, who had felt that icy chill run down their spines, they knew it was more than just a trick of the mind. Something was there, and it wasn't leaving. The footage, though reviewed multiple times, offered no answers. There was no explanation for the child's voice, no visible source for the sound. It left everyone, staff and patients alike, with an unsettling question: who or what was making that sound? No one knows for sure, but for the nurses who still work those night shifts, the haunting melody lingers in their minds long after the lights go out and the silence takes over.